They say the world can change in the blink of an eye, and for 19-year-old Kay Lake, that blink came at the worst possible time, right at the airport gate, when she was moments away from reuniting with her father. What should have been a straightforward trip home turned into a nightmare the instant a prejudiced officer singled her out, ignoring her explanations and dismissing her polite requests. Little did he know she wasn't just any young black woman. Her father was the newly appointed Point Use ambassador, but Kay was never one to flaunt her connections. She believed justice should be served on principle, not power. Kay Lake stared out the window of the small commuter plane as it taxied to the gate at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City. Her reflection wavered in the glass chestnut-brown skin, soft curls framing a determined face that still held traces of teenage uncertainty. She was 19, but life had forced her to grow up quickly. A long flight from London to New York had left her both exhausted and excited. She clutched her carry-on bag, where she kept her passport, phone, and a few precious mementos of her journey. The last few months in London had been exhilarating, an opportunity to explore the city while her father served as the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. Though Kay was proud of his role, she never liked to mention it. In her mind, her accomplishments needed to stand on their own, and so she'd opted for a bit of independence, studying art history abroad and traveling through Europe on her own. Now she was returning to the States for her summer break. She had texted her father about her flight, but they had both been swamped, he with diplomatic obligations, she with final exams. Despite their busy schedules, there was always love between them. As the aircraft docked at Terminal 4, one of the busiest at JFK, she inhaled deeply, bracing herself. This was home turf, yet it still felt foreign. America thrived on hustle, the swirl of cultures and chaos. London, though equally hectic, seemed more cohesive in some intangible way. Kay stepped off the plane into the corridor of glass windows and fluorescent lights. The typical mixture of voices in multiple languages, rolling suitcases, and airport announcements felt both comforting and disorienting. She navigated toward immigration, fully prepared for the standard processes. She had no reason to expect trouble, but a small voice in her head cautioned that not everyone was as open-minded as they claimed. Perhaps it was an inner guard she developed after too many microaggressions disguised as casual remarks about her skin color or hair texture. Once she cleared the standard immigration check without issue, Kay made her way to the baggage carousel. She waited patiently for her single, large suitcase. People jostled around her, and a toddler kept screaming for his mother's attention. Kay tried to stay calm, ignoring the minor chaos that always came with traveling. By the time she located her bag, she felt the relief of being nearly done. Just a few more steps out of baggage claim, and she would be on her way to hail a taxi. She retrieved her suitcase and headed toward the final customs checkpoint. "Welcome to the United States," a sign read, an American flag draped proudly across it. Then, in a flash, everything changed. A uniformed officer stood at the perimeter where travelers transitioned from baggage claim to the main arrivals area. Kay found his gaze lingering on her, and she couldn't ignore the icy feeling creeping up her spine. He was tall, mid-50s, with a trim moustache and narrow grey eyes that scanned the crowd. Although there were hundreds of passengers streaming by, he seemed fixated on her. Kay tried to remain calm. At first, she thought perhaps she reminded him of someone he knew, or that he was simply doing his job, scanning each face. She even forced a tight smile, hoping to dissolve any tension. But his stare hardened. Without warning, he stepped forward, holding up a hand to stop her. "Excuse me, miss," he said, voice booming over the chatter of the crowd. "I need to see your travel documents." Kay blinked, confused but compliant. She reached into her shoulder bag to retrieve her passport and the student visa papers she had used in London. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely, reading the name tag pinned to his crisp uniform. Bradley. He flipped open her passport, studying the details. "Where are you coming from?" He spoke in a clipped tone, as though a veneer of politeness could hide the suspicion in his eyes. "London," Kay answered. "I'm a student there. Well, I was for the semester." Bradley glanced at her bag, as if expecting it to spontaneously reveal contraband. "Traveling alone?" "Yes," Kay confirmed. "You sure about that? No one else with you?" A flicker of annoyance sparked in Kay. Why would he assume she was lying? "Yes, sir. I'm alone." He cleared his throat, ignoring the swirl of travelers moving around them. "Where are you from originally, miss?" Kay frowned slightly. "I'm American. I was born in Washington, D.C., huh?" He eyed the small diplomatic insignia pinned on her bag. It was a subtle emblem Kay had thought was decorative. She'd found it on her father's desk, not realizing it might stand out to certain people. "You got family in government?" She hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much. She'd always felt uneasy dropping the ambassador connection. "My father works for the State Department," she admitted softly, then tried to shift the conversation. "I'm just here on summer break." Officer Bradley's lips curled upward, but it wasn't a welcoming smile. It was more like a predator sensing easy prey. "Why don't you step over to the side for a moment?" Her heart sank. She'd seen that expression before, an authority figure deciding she was guilty of something before any evidence even existed. Kay looked around for any sign of an ally, but the crowd seemed oblivious. What was she supposed to do? Fight or comply and avoid causing a scene? She took a deep breath. All right. Following him, she noticed how he kept a hand near his belt, as if expecting her to pull out a weapon. The corridor he guided her toward was cordoned off by a metal barrier. Few travelers were asked to go there. Kay's chest tightened. She wasn't sure if this was standard procedure or the beginnings of a humiliating search. "Open your bag," Bradley ordered, snapping on rubber gloves. Kay unzipped her suitcase. Her clothes, a few books, and souvenirs from her trip tumbled into view. A Spanish-language guidebook from her brief stay in Madrid sat on top. Bradley picked through her belongings with a scowl, rifling through personal items as if they were evidence of wrongdoing. The disregard for her privacy stung. She tried to steady her shaking voice. "Officer, is there a specific reason you're searching me?" He raised an eyebrow. "Routine check," he answered curtly. "We've had some suspicious travelers lately." Kay felt the coded language. This was profiling, pure and simple, but she held her tongue, determined to keep her composure. After a thorough rummage, he stepped back. "You got an ID besides your passport? Proof of your claims? School ID?" "Yes," Kay said. She handed him her London University ID. "I was studying art history." "You can see the date stamp." Bradley looked at the card, flipping it as if searching for a flaw. Then, with a grunt, he returned it. "Wait here." He disappeared into an office behind the partition, leaving Kay standing in full view of passerby who shot her curious glances. Time crawled by. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Each second that passed felt heavier, as if the weight of the situation were pressing down on her chest. She fought the urge to pull out her phone. She didn't want to be accused of suspicious activity or disobedience. Finally, Bradley returned. He didn't look any friendlier. "Follow me," he said, gesturing for her to enter the small office area. Kay's pulse spiked. She swallowed the knot of fear, reminding herself that she had nothing to hide. Her documents were all in order. She was a law-abiding citizen, and a proud one at that. In the cramped room, 2 chairs faced an interrogation-style table. Bradley pointed to one of them. Sit. Kay sank into the chair, her mind racing. She wanted to call her father, but something told her it would only enrage Bradley further. She willed herself to stay calm, to choose her words carefully. "You mind telling me what's really going on?" Bradley asked, his hands clasped in front of him. "I'm not sure what you mean," Kay said. He leaned forward, What's your business here in the States? You sure it's just a summer break? Yes, Kay insisted. I'm a US citizen. My father works for the State Department, but that has nothing to do with me traveling in or out of the country. I have every right. Bradley cut her off. Easy now. Don't get defensive. We have reasons to be cautious. You see the news, right? People from all over coming here with God knows what intentions. Kay exhaled, feeling her temper flare. I'm just a college student coming home for the summer. I'm not. Look, Bradley said, standing up. We'll see about that. He exited abruptly, leaving her alone once more. Kay's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. She'd already been detained for nearly 40 minutes. Her phone was beginning to vibrate in her bag, probably her father checking if she'd landed safely. Her father, Kay, was torn. She always told him she could handle herself, but maybe it was time to call. Yet she also knew how proud she was. She didn't want special treatment simply because of who her dad was. She wanted fairness, period. But fairness wasn't something Officer Bradley seemed inclined to offer. Deep down, Kay realized this wasn't just about a random search. Meanwhile, in a stately office at the US Embassy in London, Ambassador Stephen Lake paced, checking his watch. Tall, with dignified salt and pepper hair and a commanding presence, Stephen never let the weight of his position overshadow his role as a father. Kay was due to arrive in New York nearly an hour ago, and he'd expected at least a text by now. He wasn't typically the anxious type, but Kay's independence sometimes left him worried. He tapped his phone. No new messages. Furrowing his brow, he decided to send another, "Hey, sweetie, just checking in. Let me know you landed safely." A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Maria, poked her head in. "Sir, you have that conference call with the State Department in 5 minutes." "Yes, thank you, Maria." Stephen nodded. "Could you hold them off a bit? My daughter's flight should have landed, and I'd like to confirm she arrived." Maria smiled. "Of course, Ambassador." Once alone again, Stephen dialed Kay's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. A flicker of worry crossed his features. Kay was rarely unreachable. He wondered if she might be stuck in a slow, moving line at customs. The memory of small comments Kay had made over the years about random suspicious stares, extra searches, or subtle harassment gnawed at him. As a black woman in a predominantly white environment, be it Europe or the United States, Kay had told him about these experiences, but she rarely let them define her. She was proud, intelligent, determined to stand on her own. Still, Stephen's paternal instincts kicked in. Perhaps it was nothing, just a phone battery dying or a glitch. But he decided that if he couldn't reach her in another 20 minutes, he'd start making calls. He had contacts at JFK. Maybe he'd call the head of airport security or someone at the Department of Homeland Security to do a discreet check. He didn't want to misuse his position, but Kay's safety mattered above all else. Back at JFK, Kay was now facing a new person in the office. Officer Bradley had been joined by another official, a younger woman with a crisp uniform identified by her badge as Officer Jenkins. She seemed more professional and less hostile, but Kay still felt cornered. "All we need is clarification," Jenkins said, motioning for Kay to remain seated. "Your passport's valid, yes, but we have to follow up on certain protocols." Bradley folded his arms, looming behind Jenkins, silent but visibly displeased. Kay took a moment to gather herself. "Officers," Kay began, voice trembling slightly, "I've done nothing wrong. I'm a student returning home. I have my British student visa, my American passport, and all my documentation is in order." Jenkins nodded. "That seems to be the case. However, your name flagged a system check." Kay's eyebrows shot up. "Flagged? For what?" "It might be a misunderstanding or a glitch," Jenkins allowed. "But your father is Stephen Lake. Correct. The US ambassador to the UK? Kay's heart sank. She hadn't wanted to mention that. Yes, but that has nothing to do with Bradley's laugh was derisive. So you're claiming that your father is an ambassador, some big shot, right? Kay's frustration flared. I'm not claiming, it's a fact. Look it up. Stephen Lake was appointed earlier this year. This is all public information. Jenkins shot Bradley a look, as if to signal he should keep his comments in check. We're verifying everything, Miss Lake. If that's true, it should be straightforward. Kay inhaled, her shoulders tense. She realized that the system flag could be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes family members of diplomats were subject to extra scrutiny, an odd bureaucratic quirk meant to track potential threats or, ironically, defection. She had read about it in passing but never experienced it so directly. Maybe it was just that, but something in Bradley's tone told her there was more to it. Bradley tapped his foot impatiently. If you're so high and mighty, how come you're traveling alone, carrying a bag full of tourist junk? Doesn't look very ambassadorial. Kay gritted her teeth. I'm not an ambassador, I'm a student. I like to travel independently. Bradley let out a harsh chuckle. Independent, huh? Jenkins intervened. All right, calm down, Miss Lake. We just need to confirm with the State Department that you are who you say you are. Unfortunately, it's taking some time to get a direct line. Kay almost sighed in relief. Fine. I'll wait for them to confirm. I just want to get out of here. Behind Jenkins's carefully neutral expression, Kay sensed a flicker of sympathy. The woman seemed to understand Kay's predicament, but was bound by protocol and overshadowed by Bradley's presence. Let me go see if we have any updates, Jenkins said, stepping out of the office. Bradley moved closer, and Kay tried not to shrink back. You know, if you people would just cooperate from the start, he said in a low tone, these things go a lot smoother. Kay felt her temper spike. You people, I've cooperated fully. You searched my bag, my documents. You've had me waiting here for nearly an hour. He smirked. Maybe next time you'll think twice before. Before what? Kay asked, voice shaking. Before being a college student, before being black. Bradley's face contorted. Don't play that card with me, he snarled. Kay's heart pounded in her chest. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. It's not a card, it's my reality. For a moment, anger hung thick in the air. Kay was certain that if Jenkins hadn't re-entered the room just then, Bradley might have escalated further. Instead, he took a step back, regaining his composure in front of his colleague. Miss Lake, Jenkins began, a bit breathless, we've reached someone at the State Department. They're verifying your father's details. We should have confirmation shortly. Kay exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thank you. We appreciate your patience, Jenkins said, glancing pointedly at Bradley as if urging him to remain professional. Once we have confirmation, you'll be free to go. Kay nodded, though a swirl of emotions churned inside her. Relief that this nightmare might soon end, mixed with anger at how she'd been treated, all underlined by a persistent knot of fear that it wasn't over yet. Experience had taught her that even when you follow the rules, the situation can turn on a dime if someone with authority decides to twist the narrative. With one last penetrating glare at Kay, Bradley folded his arms and leaned against the wall, his scowl unwavering. It was as if he couldn't bear the possibility that he might have been in the wrong. Kay wished more than anything that it was all a bad dream, but she was wide awake, and the only way out was through. Back in London, Ambassador Lake concluded his conference call, a strained line between his brows. No message from Kay, no call. Something was off. By now, she would have at least texted to say she had arrived safely. He decided to exercise caution, but the father in him outweighed the diplomat. He picked up the phone and dialed an old friend, Mark Ellis, who currently managed a key security department at JFK. "Mark," Stephen said, trying to keep his voice calm, "it's Stephen Lake. Sorry to bother you, but my daughter flew into JFK about an hour or so ago and I haven't heard from her. Could you possibly check if there's been any hold-up?" There was a momentary silence. Mark responded, "Of course, Stephen. The first make some discreet inquiries and get back to you as soon as I can." Stephen thanked him and hung up. He paced the length of his office, the polished wood floors creaking under his measured steps. This was exactly the kind of scenario Kay hated her father, using his connections to solve a problem she felt she should handle on her own. But Stephen also knew the world could be less than fair, especially toward young women of color, and Kay's safety mattered more than any principle of self-reliance. 15 minutes later, Mark called back. Stephen answered on the first ring. "Stephen, I'm hearing that Kay might be in a secondary screening area," Mark said, carefully diplomatic. "I'm not certain why. Possibly just a random security check. Let me see if I can expedite her release." Stephen clenched the phone. "Thank you, Mark. Please do. She's an American citizen. She shouldn't be detained unnecessarily. I'll do what I can. I'll call you back." As the call ended, Stephen felt a surge of relief, tinged with anger. Kay was indeed being held, for reasons unknown. He trusted Mark to unravel the situation, but if Kay was suffering any harassment, there would be consequences. In the back of his mind, Stephen recalled Kay's words, "I don't want to always rely on you, Dad. I want to stand on my own 2 feet." But fatherly instincts and official responsibilities collided in his heart. Kay was not alone. She had him, and he would move heaven and earth to protect her. In the cramped office at JFK, Kay still waited. Officer Jenkins had stepped out again to check on the State Department verification. Bradley remained, staring her down from across the room. The air felt stifling, as if every breath Kay took had to be fought for. Her phone, confiscated earlier, rested on the table next to Bradley. He occasionally glanced at it, as though he expected it to ring at any moment. Kay ached to see if her father had called or texted. She tried to keep her posture straight, hands resting on her lap, to still their trembling. Bradley's eyes flicked to her carry-on bag. "Mind if I check in there again?" he asked, though it was more a statement than a request. Kay felt her patience wearing thin. "You already did." Bradley shrugged. "Regulations." She forced a thin, polite smile, not wanting to give him an excuse to escalate. He rummaged through the contents. Kay's wallet, a small makeup pouch, a notebook filled with sketches from various art galleries she'd visited, and a few letters from her British classmates. As he pulled out the letters, Kay felt a surge of indignation. Those were personal, filled with jokes and memories. She had nothing to hide, but the invasion of privacy burned. He leafed through them, squinting as though the letters might hold subversive messages. Finding nothing, he tossed them aside. Kay bit her tongue, forcing herself not to snap. She could practically feel the racism thrumming in the room, an unspoken assumption that she was an imposter, a criminal, or something worse. The same prejudice that had followed her in subtle ways through her life, now wearing the intimidating garb of a man with a badge and a gun. At last, Jenkins returned, holding a piece of paper. "Miss Lake, the State Department confirms that your father is indeed Ambassador Stephen Lake. We have an official letter verifying your relationship and travel details." Kay exhaled, though she sensed a but coming. Jenkins scanned the paper. "However, the system glitch that flagged your name hasn't been fully resolved. To expedite this, we've requested a phone call with a superior. It shouldn't take long now." Kay nodded, though her shoulders remained tense. "Thank you." Bradley frowned, as if disappointed that Kay might actually be legitimate. His gaze shifted to Jenkins. "You really believe all that? Something's not adding up." Jenkins pressed her lips together. The official State Department channels are quite clear. Unless there's hard evidence of wrongdoing, Bradley pounced on her words. Look at her. She claims she's just a student, but she's got some diplomatic emblem on her bag, probably stolen. Her father's an ambassador, and yet she's traveling alone. Don't you think that's odd, Jenkins? The younger officer hesitated, caught between rank and reason. I think it's not our place to speculate if the documentation checks out. Kay, exhausted by the ordeal, spoke up quietly. Why do you hate me so much, Officer Bradley? What have I personally done to you? Bradley's mouth tightened, and for a moment, Kay thought she saw a glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes, perhaps the slightest realization that his treatment of her was baseless. But then his pride reasserted itself. I don't hate you, he said stiffly. I'm just doing my job, protecting this country from threats. Kay's eyebrows rose. Am I a threat? Bradley said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Before the tension could thicken further, Jenkins's radio crackled. A voice on the other end indicated that their superior, a certain Captain Wilson, was on the line. Jenkins grabbed the handset, nodded to Kay. We'll get this settled now. As Jenkins left to take the call, Kay felt a small wave of hope. This could be over soon, and she could walk out of the airport as a free citizen like she had every right to. Then, a chilling thought. What if Bradley used some fabricated reason to keep her here, out of spite? Almost on cue, Bradley stepped toward the door, then paused. Don't try to leave, he warned her. I'll be right back. Kay watched him exit, her eyes burning with fatigue and the sting of tears she refused to let fall. She felt an odd mixture of anger, heartbreak, and resilience. If she caved now, if she cried or begged for mercy, she'd be letting him define her. She refused. She was Kay Lake strong, smart, resourceful. Her father raised her to stand tall, to articulate her truth. Minutes crawled by. Finally, the door opened, and Jenkins returned, followed by Bradley. Jenkins looked marginally relieved. Miss Lake, we've been instructed by Captain Wilson to release you immediately. Your documents are in order. We apologize for the delay, Kay sighed. So, can I leave now? Jenkins offered a tight smile. Yes. She handed Kay her phone. You're free to go. Once again, apologies for the inconvenience. Kay accepted her phone and started collecting her belongings. She stood, nearly collapsing with emotional exhaustion. Before she moved to the door, she glanced at Bradley. He was silent, arms folded tight across his chest, his expression hovering between anger and resentment. She felt a fleeting urge to say something scathing, but decided he wasn't worth it. She quietly walked past him. In the hallway, Kay's phone buzzed in her hand. It was a text from her father. Where are you? Are you okay? She typed a quick reply, her heart pounding as she emerged into the main arrivals area. A swirl of relief mingled with the humiliation of the past hour. The bright lights and bustling travelers felt surreal after the claustrophobia of the interrogation room. She had made it through, but she had no idea that her ordeal was not entirely over. For Kay, this humiliating experience would spur repercussions far beyond the airport's walls and deliver a karmic blow to those who believe themselves untouchable behind a badge. Kay sank onto a bench near an airport cafe, needing a moment to steady herself. She reread her father's texts. She fired off a quick explanation. Detained by an officer. Just got out. I'm at Terminal 4 arrivals. I'm okay. Her phone immediately rang. She answered, hearing her father's familiar, calming baritone. Kay, thank God. Are you hurt? No, she said, her voice wavering. But it was horrible, Dad. They searched my things. They treated me like a criminal. She heard the anger simmer in her father's tone. I'm so sorry. I've already spoken to Mark Ellis at JFK. He told me you were in secondary screening. I'm waiting for a formal explanation. I'm also coming to the US next week, and rest assured I'll be addressing this. Kay sniffed, blinking back tears. I just want to leave this place. Go home, he said gently. Take a taxi or ride share. We can talk once you settle in. And Kay, if you want to file a complaint, we'll make sure it's heard. You deserve justice, not just release. She nodded. Okay, Dad, I love you. Thanks. As she ended the call, Kay noticed she still felt shaky. She got up, heading for the exit. The warm summer air outside was a shock to her system after the sterile chill of the airport. She dragged her suitcase toward the taxi stand, the wheels bumping on uneven pavement. She tried to focus on the small victory of her release, but Officer Bradley's menacing face hovered in her mind. She looked over her shoulder. She could have sworn she glimpsed him in the distance, standing near a pillar. Her pulse quickened. Was he following her? She shook her head, telling herself she was just paranoid. She had no reason to linger. She flagged a taxi, threw her suitcase in the trunk, and slid into the back seat. Manhattan, she told the driver, giving him her address. As the cab pulled away, Kay couldn't shake the sensation that the threads of this incident would follow her. She wasn't wrong. In the coming days, her life would be upended yet again because a racist cop who felt humiliated and outraged was not content to let things lie. 2 days later, Kay had just begun to recover. She was staying in her father's penthouse in Manhattan temporarily. He would be in New York in a few days, in part to handle an important diplomatic function at the United Nations, and partly to ensure Kay was truly all right. She kept busy reading for her summer coursework, trying to put the ordeal behind her. Then her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. We're not done yet. Her stomach lurched. She stared at the text, her mind racing. The rational part of her said it could be a spam message, or maybe someone from high school messing around. But her intuition told her otherwise. A moment later, a second text arrived. You might be Ambassador's daughter, but that won't protect you forever. A chill ran down her spine. Officer Bradley? Could he have tracked down her personal number? The possibility both infuriated and terrified her. Her father's security measures were typically solid, but Kay realized she'd given her number to so many people while traveling someone unscrupulous could have passed it along. That evening, Kay confided in her father via a long-distance call. She confessed her suspicions about the threatening messages. She could almost hear him pacing on the other side of the line, voice taut with anger. Kay, I'll be on a plane tomorrow. Don't leave the apartment unless necessary, all right? I'll contact Mark Ellis again and get some protective measures in place. Reluctantly, Kay agreed. She spent a tense night, half expecting someone to burst through the door. Memories of the airport interrogation looped in her mind, fueling her anxiety. Why would that man risk sending her threats? Did he truly think he could intimidate her into silence? But Kay was not one to be easily bullied. The next morning she pulled out her laptop and began drafting a detailed account of everything that had happened at JFK. If she had to file a formal complaint or even speak to the media, she would. This was bigger than her personal trauma. It was about shedding light on abuses of power and the targeting of black travelers. She titled the document, Statement of Events at JFK on June 15th. As she wrote, her anger turned to resolve. She would not be a victim. Ambassador Stephen Lake arrived at JFK the following afternoon, stepping off a diplomatic flight with urgent purpose. His phone buzzed with updates from Mark Ellis, who had arranged a meeting in a private lounge within the airport's administrative sector. Stephen's usual calm diplomacy was underscored by protective rage. No father would stand by and let their child be threatened, especially by an officer tasked with upholding the law. In a secure conference room, Mark Ellis awaited him with a few members of airport security and Captain Wilson of the airport police. They exchanged polite greetings. Mark cleared his throat. Stephen, we've examined the incident reports. It appears Officer Bradley initiated a secondary screening due to a system glitch that flagged Kay's travel. Admittedly, the glitch was resolved, and Kay should have been released sooner. Captain Wilson stepped in, looking genuinely apologetic. "Ambassador Lake, we are investigating Bradley's conduct. We have reason to believe he went beyond standard procedure." Stephen inhaled, reining in his temper. "I appreciate that. But more has happened." Kay received threatening messages. She believes they might be from Bradley. "I want to know if he had access to her phone number or personal information." Wilson's face paled. He shouldn't have. Protocol forbids collecting personal phone numbers unless necessary for official documentation, which this was not. Yet Kay is receiving explicit threats referencing her father being an ambassador, Stephen said, voice cold as steel. Mark stepped in. "We can trace the messages if Kay still has them. If Bradley's behind it, we'll handle it immediately." Stephen nodded. "I expect nothing less. My daughter will not be intimidated by a rogue officer." Captain Wilson grimaced. "I understand, sir. We'll get to the bottom of it." Stephen stood. "I'm heading to meet Kay now, but please keep me informed. If Bradley tries to contact her again or approach her, I want immediate action taken." The men agreed, and Stephen exited the conference room. This was not how he had hoped to spend his time in New York, but Kay's safety came first, even if it meant going head-to-head with a racist cop who believed himself untouchable. Late that evening, Kay and her father sat across from each other in the penthouse living room. Light from the city skyline flickered through the glass windows. Kay explained every detail of the airport encounter, from Bradley's initial suspicion to his final glare of resentment. She then showed her father the threatening messages. He read them, a storm gathering in his eyes. He looked up. "Kay, do you want to press charges? We can go through official channels. There might be a legal route as well." She hesitated. "I just want him to leave me alone. But if pressing charges is how we accomplish that, then yes." He nodded, picking up his phone. "I'll inform Mark Ellis. We'll get the ball rolling." However, before he could dial, the phone buzzed. It was Mark. Stephen answered in front of Kay, the call on speaker. "Stephen, Captain Wilson confronted Bradley this afternoon," Mark said. "It did not go well." Kay's heart thudded. "What do you mean?" she cut in. Mark hesitated. Bradley became agitated, denied everything. Then he stormed out. Not exactly an admission of guilt, but let's just say he didn't do himself any favors. "Has he been suspended?" Stephen asked. "As of this evening, yes. Pending a full investigation." Mark sighed. "He's been stripped of his badge and gun. Still, there's concern he might retaliate." Kay's throat tightened. She felt a mix of relief and fear. "What should I do? Stay with your father? Possibly consider temporary bodyguards until we're sure Bradley is no threat?" Mark paused. "We've also found suspicious communications from his work computer. Anti-immigrant, racist language. We're forwarding it to the Internal Affairs Division. Bradley likely faces serious consequences." Kay exchanged a glance with her father. The evidence was damning, but it also validated her experience. "Thank you, Mark," she said quietly. They ended the call. Stephen placed a reassuring hand on Kay's shoulder. "We'll ensure justice is served. Kay, he can't terrorize people like this any longer." Even as Kay nodded, relief flooding in, she felt a haunting sense that the saga wasn't truly over. People like Bradley didn't just back down gracefully. But if he tried anything else, Kay had no doubt her father, alongside the law, would be there to stop him. A week passed. Kay tried to resume a normal life. She strolled around Manhattan, visited her favorite bookstore, caught up with old friends. Yet the fear of a sudden confrontation lurked in her mind. Every unfamiliar face or stray look made her heart jump, but it seemed that with Bradley's suspension, the direct harassment had ceased. Kay allowed herself to relax until one sweltering afternoon when she emerged from a grocery store and spotted a familiar figure across the street, Bradley. He stood by a lamppost, wearing civilian clothes, his posture stiff, their eyes locked. Kay's stomach churned with fear and fury. She wondered if he'd been watching her, following her. She quickly ducked behind a parked SUV, fumbling with her phone to call her father. 100 thoughts raced through her mind. Had Bradley snapped completely? Was he here to intimidate her further, or worse? But when she peered over the car hood, he was gone. The sidewalk was busy, thronging with people. For a moment, Kay questioned if it was truly him or just someone who looked like him. Her instincts, though, screamed it was him. Shakily, she told her father what had happened. He insisted on sending a security detail to her. Reluctantly, Kay agreed. She hated the intrusion, but the alternative was worse. 2 plainclothes security officers arrived at the penthouse later that day, introducing themselves as Davis and Carter. They were calm and professional, making Kay feel safer. Days slid by without incident, and Kay tried to focus on finishing her official statement for the inquiry into Bradley's misconduct. She was on the cusp of some closure when an unexpected call came from the district attorney's office. They were exploring charges against Bradley harassment, abuse of power. Kay was invited to make a formal statement to help build the case. So Kay found herself in a downtown office building, wearing a simple blouse and slacks, sitting across from an assistant district attorney named Miss Ramirez. The woman questioned her gently about every detail of the airport detention and subsequent threatening texts. Kay recounted it all, feeling her composure waver once or twice. But she persevered, determined to see this through. When Miss Ramirez finished typing, she smiled with encouragement. "Thank you, Miss Lake. Your testimony is crucial in holding Bradley accountable." Kay nodded. "I just want to make sure no one else suffers what I did." Miss Ramirez's eyes hardened with conviction. "We'll do our best." A month later, Kay's life had nearly returned to normal. She was prepping for her next semester, meeting friends in the city, and her father had resumed his full diplomatic schedule. The storm seemed to have passed, though Kay still occasionally glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see Bradley lurking. Then, on a sunny morning, Kay was sitting in her living room when her phone pinged with an alert. She opened a news app to find a breaking headline: "Former JFK officer arrested after violent incident outside local bar." Her mouth went dry as she read. The article detailed how a disgruntled ex-officer, identified as Bradley, had allegedly gotten into a fight with 2 men outside a bar. Police found an unregistered firearm in his car. He was arrested on the spot and now faced multiple charges, including carrying an illegal weapon, assault, and resisting arrest. A part of Kay was relieved. It meant he was behind bars, no longer free to stalk her. Another part of her felt the weight of tragedy. Bradley was a racist, angry man, consumed by hatred that ultimately destroyed his life. She didn't pity him exactly, but she recognized the profound brokenness in someone who chose that path. The phone rang. It was her father. He'd just seen the news as well. "Looks like that's the end of Bradley's rampage," Stephen said, sighing. "I'm sorry you went through all of this, but at least we know he can't hurt anyone else." Kay nodded. "Hard karma," she murmured, remembering the fear and fury she'd felt. He did this to himself. Stephen was silent for a beat, then spoke gently. "You've grown even stronger through this, Kay. I'm so proud of you." Emotions swelled in her chest. The relief that it was truly over, the sadness that such hatred existed in the first place, and the gratitude that her father stood by her side. "Thanks, Dad." In the weeks that followed, Kay continued to cooperate with the DA's office. They assured her that additional charges for harassment and misconduct might be added to Bradley's docket, pending the outcome of her complaint. Kay found a measure of closure, knowing that the law was catching up with him. Indeed, the cycle of karma had turned. He had lost his career, his reputation, and now faced a prison sentence. Summer heat gradually gave way to the cooler breezes of early autumn. Kay prepared to return to university, this time transferring to a college in New York so she could be closer to family. She and her father had discussed the possibility of her resuming studies abroad, but after what she'd been through, she felt she needed time to heal without the extra layer of international travel. One afternoon, Kay, Stephen, and Maria, his assistant, sat in a cafe not far from the United Nations building. Over iced teas and sandwiches, they reflected on the past few months. To think, Maria mused, all of this started because Kay was singled out by a hateful officer. Stephen nodded solemnly. It's a stark reminder that racial profiling is very real, even for the family of diplomats. We have a lot of work to do as a country. Kay sipped her iced tea. I used to think showing my ID was enough, that if I followed the law, everything would be fine. But the law is only as good as the people enforcing it. Maria reached for Kay's hand, giving it a squeeze. And how do you feel now? Kay paused. Tired, but also determined. People like Bradley can't be allowed to scare others into silence. We have to use our voices, our rights, to stand up. Stephen smiled at his daughter, pride evident in his eyes. There's the Kay I raised, always fighting for what's right. I believe this experience, however painful, has forged a greater sense of purpose in you. She returned the smile. I think it has. She recalled the panic, the shame, the rage in that small interrogation room at JFK. She remembered how, at times, she had been tempted to name-drop her father's position just to end the ordeal, but she'd refrained until pressed, wanting her freedom simply as a rightful citizen. In the end, ironically, it was the system itself, once properly engaged, that proved Bradley's wrongdoing. Perhaps that was a small testament to the fact that justice could prevail, even if it arrived late. In the final days before Kay headed off to her new college, she heard from the DA's office one last time. Bradley had pled guilty to multiple charges, including illegal possession of a firearm and a separate count of official misconduct. He faced a prison term. Kay felt relief, a sense of finality. This chapter, for now, was closed. Yet, Kay knew that the fight against prejudice and abuses of power continued in countless other lives. She silently vowed to remain vigilant. If she could stand up and protect others from a similar fate, she would. Her father, the U.S. ambassador, had offered all his diplomatic might to defend her. But Kay believed in a world where every traveler, regardless of skin color or background, would be treated with dignity and respect. That was her dream, and she would keep striving for it, one day at a time. Thank you for watching this dramatic story of one young woman's fight against bigotry and injustice. Kay Lake's journey reminds us that no position of power, or lack thereof, should ever determine how we're treated at the borders, on the streets, or in any public place. Her experience highlights the importance of standing firm in our truths, supporting each other when confronted by abuse, and trusting that, in the end, hateful deeds will face the consequences they deserve. If you found Kay's story inspiring or eye-opening, please like this video and share it with your friends so more people can learn from her experience. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more captivating stories that challenge injustice and champion hope. By joining us, you become part of a community dedicated to truth, equality, and courageous storytelling. Together, let's keep shining a light on these critical issues.